Hey guys, tonight we're quietly sneaking through history's most exclusive, scandalous, and deeply uncomfortable territory, the royal bedchamber. That's right. Forget dragons, forget jousts, forget plague boils for a second. Tonight is about the real mysteries of medieval life. What happened behind those velvet curtains when the candle was out? The king's bunion ointment was on the nightstand, and the only thing standing between you and the throne was, apparently, a goose-feather mattress with the structural integrity of a marshmallow. Before we get lost in the sheets of history, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this. If you don't, feel free to fall asleep anyway. I'll never know. And leave a comment telling me what time it is where you are, and what kind of weird thing you keep on your nightstand. For me, it's a half-melted candle, 3 empty water glasses, and the haunting memory of high school gym class. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. But let's ask the big questions, because the royal bedchamber was so much more than a place for sleep or romance. What exactly did a king wear to bed? Did queens ever get any privacy? How many servants did it take just to get you undressed? What happened if you had to pee at 2 a.m. and you were on the wrong side of the canopy? Did people ever actually sleep alone? Was the bed warmer the most coveted staff position? Or just a fancy way of saying my job is to not set the curtains on fire? What did the sheets smell like after months without soap? Could you ever get a good night's rest when your mattress was 80% straw, 20% political intrigue, and possibly home to 3 varieties of lice? And most importantly, would you, a modern human with back pain and a Netflix addiction, survive a single night in the medieval royal bedroom without accidentally starting a war over blanket territory? Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1387, inside the royal castle. You are, technically, a member of the court, but don't get too comfortable. The fire is crackling, the tapestries are musty, and your pajamas are whatever you wore to dinner. Good luck. Welcome to the royal bedchamber, a room more crowded than a Black Friday sale but with worse ventilation. Forget privacy. The moment you cross the threshold, you're greeted by guards, scribes, gossipy chambermaids, and that one guy who's technically there for security but is definitely just here for the drama. Your first task? Pretend you don't see them staring while you fumble with your shoes. The medieval royal bedchamber is not what you think. You picture silk curtains, soft candlelight, maybe a romantic moment of peace after a long day of running the kingdom. Instead, it's more like the world's least relaxing group project. The air is thick with the smell of lavender sachets, burning tallow, wet wool, and something unidentifiable that you sincerely hope is just yesterday's turnip stew. Every surface is busy. Servants scurry around arranging tapestries, polishing candlesticks, and fluffing pillows that haven't been truly fluffy since Richard the Lionheart was a toddler. If you want to get anywhere near the actual bed, you first have to dodge 3 maids stripping last night's linens, a page folding up an official royal nightshirt, and an under-butler sweeping up straw with a broom that's mostly hope and splinters. And then there are the witnesses. Always witnesses. Medieval royalty rarely got a moment alone. Even at bedtime, the act of retiring for the night was as public as a modern politician's social media feed. Your evening entrance to the bedchamber might be observed by your closest advisors, the resident priest, 2 cousins, and, because it's Tuesday, a diplomat from Flanders who just loves bedtime ceremonies. Your job is to look regal while suppressing the urge to trip over your own slippers. The ceremony starts at the door. A chamberlain announces your arrival with a flourish, as if you're being introduced at the Oscars. His Majesty the King, ready for bed. Everyone turns. There is a moment of awkward silence. You try to remember if you're wearing socks with holes in them. No such luck. At least 3 people are cataloguing your wardrobe choices for later gossip. The royal bedchamber, far from being a retreat, is really a stage. Every gesture is observed, every yawn noted, Did you sigh too heavily when the page handed you your robe? That'll be tomorrow's rumor. The king is gravely weary. The queen must have been discussing estate taxes again. A simple stretch of the arms could spark debate over whether you're showing off your biceps to the Duchess of Aquitaine or just trying to pop your back into place. Let's not forget the ever-watchful household staff. There are valets, footmen, personal attendants, and 2 or 3 extra people whose actual job descriptions have been lost to time, but who will absolutely weigh in if you try to close the curtains yourself. You'd think a king or queen could say, "I need a minute alone." Not so much. The last monarch who tried that woke up the next morning to find half the court panicking and the official physician prescribing leeches for dangerously independent behavior. Meanwhile, somewhere in the background, an elderly courtier is reciting the rules of etiquette in a voice that could curdle milk. Apparently, it is unseemly to remove your own crown, but also disrespectful to let anyone else touch it with their left hand. You nod and try to follow along, even though your mind is mostly on the prospect of not tripping over the rug. Of course, there's always one servant who tries to make you feel better. Just relax, Your Grace. Everyone is too busy to notice you. This is a lie. Everyone is absolutely noticing you. Even the dog curled up on the hearth is taking mental notes. If you're lucky, the witnesses eventually take the hint and begin to file out. Backwards, of course, so as not to turn their back on royalty. This means 20 people shuffling slowly out of the room, maintaining eye contact with you while trying not to collide with the chamber pot. At last, you're alone. Or at least, you think you are, until a quiet cough from behind the bed curtains reveals the night watchman, whose job it is to make sure nobody sneaks in to assassinate you in your sleep, or worse, borrow your best cloak without asking. And so ends your grand entrance into the royal bedchamber. Privacy. 0, humiliation, always. Welcome to the most exclusive room in the castle, where absolutely everybody is invited. Ready for bed? Not so fast. In the royal bedchamber, undressing is a team sport. There's at least 3 people yanking at laces, 1 person folding your cloak, and someone whose entire job is just to hold your nightcap. If you've ever struggled to remove skinny jeans after a long day, imagine doing it in front of your mother-in-law, 4 pages, and a monk. Let's start with the basics. There is no such thing as a quick change in the medieval royal world. You are encased in so many layers, you could survive a mild jousting accident before anyone even noticed. First, you have to get rid of the outermost cloak, the one lined with velvet and decorated with about half the kingdom's annual wool budget. That comes off with a dramatic flourish, sometimes accompanied by applause from the younger pages. The cloak is whisked away by a servant who's been waiting in the shadows just for this moment. You haven't seen him before, and you'll never see him again, but his commitment to cloak folding is fierce. Next comes the ceremonial unlacing. This is a delicate operation. Your tunic is held together by more knots than a sailor's handbook, and at least one that's basically just decorative. 2 attendants move in, each one responsible for a different set of laces, tugging at your clothing like a couple of determined toddlers unwrapping a Christmas present. There's always at least one stubborn knot that simply refuses to cooperate. It becomes a spectacle. One attendant pulls out a wooden implement known as the lace prodder, which looks suspiciously like a knitting needle but is, according to tradition, absolutely essential for this task. Meanwhile, the rest of the room pretends not to notice you standing there in partial disarray, arms lifted, wishing you'd just invented Velcro a few centuries early. Underneath your tunic, surprise, more layers. There's an undertunic, a long linen shirt, possibly a quilted gambeson, just in case someone tries to assassinate you on your way to bed. Woolen hose that itch like medieval fiberglass, and, if you're a king, an embarrassing collection of royal garters, some of which you haven't taken off since Michaelmas. Every layer is removed with extreme ceremony, each one carefully folded by a different attendant, until your wardrobe for the day is now a small, perfectly aligned mountain of fabric on a nearby bench. The real fun begins with the footwear. Medieval shoes are more puzzle than fashion statement, often consisting of multiple straps, toggles, and bits of fur that someone swore was stylish in Burgundy last winter. Removing them is a group activity. A page kneels at your feet, unlacing the shoes while simultaneously trying not to notice the state of your royal socks, which have absorbed a day's worth of sweat, dust, and probably at least one political scandal. If you're lucky, your socks come off in one piece. If not, the kingdom's most skilled darning maid will be summoned at sunrise. Let's pause for a moment and consider the psychological cost of all this. It's not just the stripping away of layers, it's the stripping away of dignity. Every yawn, every awkward shuffle, every moment spent hopping on one foot while someone tugs at your hose is meticulously observed by a staff that will, let's be honest, absolutely tell the entire scullery about it later. The king nearly toppled over removing his chauces. The bishop blushed. The dog hasn't stopped barking since. And then there's the nightcap, the pièce de résistance. Once all other layers are gone and you stand in your finest, cleanest nightshirt. A designated nightcap attendant steps forward, presenting the royal sleeping hat with all the gravitas of a sacred relic. You place it on your head, everyone bows, and for one fleeting moment you wonder if this is what true power feels like. It's not. Finally, when all the layers have been peeled away and your clothing has been folded and catalogued like a museum exhibit, you're allowed to shuffle toward the bed. Of course, at least 3 people remain in the room, just in case you need help getting into the actual sheets. And as you slip between the covers, you realize something profound. In medieval times, undressing was less about comfort and more about putting on one last show. Tomorrow morning, you'll do it all again, this time in reverse, with twice as many buttons and none of the dignity you started with. Think silk pajamas? Not so much. Medieval royalty wore nightshirts that looked suspiciously like day shirts, just slightly cleaner, if you're lucky. Queens might have extra ruffles. Kings might wear a cap so pointy it could double as a weapon. Either way, you're not winning any sleepwear awards. The truth is, medieval royal sleepwear was less about comfort and more about how many layers can I wear before I sweat through the mattress. There's no Victoria's Secret catalogue here. Instead, you're looking at a full-length linen shift, maybe a thick wool overshirt for drafty nights. And, if you're especially fancy, a silk scarf, which mostly exists to let people know you're above the concept of bedtime poverty. Nightwear was less fashion statement, more humble brag about who had the cleanest laundry day. Let's break down your options. The basic royal nightshirt is a shapeless, ankle-length sack made of linen, possibly the least sensual fabric ever woven by human hands. Linen's best quality? It's breathable. Its worst? That's also its only quality. In summer, you sweat straight through it and wake up feeling like a damp salad. In winter, it provides all the insulation of a well-intentioned handshake. If you're a queen, you might get a decorative frill at the neckline, lace cuffs, or, if the treasury is flush, a faded bit of embroidery, so the servants can tell you, apart from your husband in the middle of the night, you don't want to accidentally crawl into bed with the archbishop. Kings are a little more utilitarian. Their nightshirts look just like their regular tunics, but with more regret. The color of royal sleepwear is generously off-white, which in medieval terms is somewhere between once was white and survived a stew accident. There is no such thing as matching pajama sets. If you're lucky, the shirt only smells faintly of the previous night's garlic and mutton feast. If you're not, well, congratulations. You've invented the world's first scented bedding. But what really makes the ensemble? The nightcap. This isn't the let's put on some jazz and have a brandy nightcap. No, it's an actual hat. Pointed or rounded, long or short, and occasionally adorned with a festive pom-pom that flops into your eyes and doubles as an emergency tissue. Nightcaps aren't just a quirky fashion choice, they're a defense mechanism against castles colder than your ex's heart. You tuck the cap firmly over your ears and hope it doesn't slide down over your nose by 3 a.m. Because nothing ruins a good royal dream like accidental self-suffocation. Footwear is another delight. You don't want to walk barefoot on cold flagstones unless you're keen on catching a medieval head cold. Enter the bed slipper. Imagine a cross between a sock, a shoe, and a small, deflated animal. Some are lined with fur, for the rich. Some are just extra wool, for the frugal. And all of them are designed to fall off immediately the moment you try to leave bed for a midnight chamber pot run. It's a security system. If your slippers go missing in the night, someone's up to no good. Now, if you think undergarments might play a role, think again. The medieval approach to bedtime underpants was, how to put this, minimalist. You sleep in your shift and pray for good ventilation. Of course, if you're especially modest or paranoid about drafts, you might add an extra layer or two, but this only ensures that the first 15 minutes of your day are spent peeling yourself out of bed like an onion with anxiety. And don't forget, pajamas are never just for you. Servants see them, courtiers comment on them, diplomats occasionally catch a glimpse and report back to their home countries, sparking low-level international pajama rivalries. If you thought you could just fade away into sweet dreams, you're wrong. Your sleepwear is a matter of national security and high-fashion medieval style, which is to say, absolutely none at all. So, as you settle in for the night, swaddled in linen, clutching a pointy cap, and praying your slippers are still where you left them, remember, in the medieval royal bedchamber, sleepwear is less about comfort and more about surviving until morning with dignity. If you're lucky, the royal bed was less a place to sleep and more a piece of furniture designed to intimidate visiting nobles. Massive, canopied, draped in heavy velvet, and roughly as comfortable as a hay bale in a windstorm, lumpy, uneven, and supported by a frame that creaked louder than the court jester's knees. Let's set the scene. You step into the royal bedchamber, and there it is, the main event. Not a simple sleeping arrangement, but a hulking four-poster monument to the idea that more is more. The headboard alone is carved with enough scenes of battle, saints, and rampant foliage to keep a medieval art historian occupied for a full sabbatical. Everything about the bed screams status, not comfort. If you're a visiting count or ambassador, you're meant to stand there in awe, subtly reminded that your own mattress back home is just a lumpy sack of straw with commitment issues. First, the scale. Medieval royal beds are enormous, easily accommodating not just the monarch, but a rotating cast of spouses, children, visiting dignitaries, 2 dogs, and anyone else with a plausible excuse to share the warmth. The canopy, draped with layers of velvet so heavy they could stop an arrow, serves less as mosquito protection and more as a statement. We may not have central heating, but by the saints, we have drapery. The curtains are drawn closed each night by a footman whose job description includes occasional entanglement and mild asphyxiation. But don't be fooled by appearances. Beneath all this theatricality lies the true medieval mattress experience. Uneven, lumpy, and suspiciously mobile. The mattress is stuffed with a complex mixture of feathers for those with money, horsehair for those with horses, or, more commonly, straw. If you're lucky, the straw was replaced sometime this season. If not, your bed is a lively ecosystem of last summer's hay, some questionable lumps, and at least 3 types of bugs that haven't been formally classified. There's no such thing as memory foam, unless you count the memory of every person who's ever slept, bounced, or spilled soup on it. Sleeping on a royal bed means embracing medieval ergonomics. You settle in, only to roll helplessly toward the center valley created by centuries of royal tossing, turning, and existential dread. The entire structure sways gently if you move, and the springs, oh, the springs, there are none. Just a wooden frame that squeaks, cracks, and sounds suspiciously like it's about to collapse every time you roll over. Every royal family has at least one story of a bed-related accident, usually ending with a duke tumbling to the floor and claiming, "I meant to do that." And let's not ignore the royal pillows, overstuffed with feathers if you're lucky, but often lumpy and shaped like potatoes with a grudge. You might have 1, 2, or 20, stacked in a display that would make modern interior decorators weep for mercy. The pillowcases, hand-embroidered and probably washed at least once since the last coronation, offer a choice between crunchy and suspiciously damp. You choose your fate nightly. Bedding is another adventure. The top quilt is so heavy that it takes 2 attendants to wrestle it into place. And if you're not careful, you might find yourself pinned beneath it like a medieval fossil, unable to move until morning. Beneath the quilt, several layers of wool blankets, each more itchy than the last. Medieval comfort was apparently a competition to see how many natural fibers could touch your skin before you lost circulation. Let's not forget the bed's social role. This isn't just for sleep, it's for ceremony. Royal births, state meetings, private audiences, and, occasionally, strategic sulking, all conducted from the bed, with half the court looking on. Imagine trying to look authoritative while sitting cross-legged on a mattress that lists dramatically to one side. In the end, the royal bed was more about sending a message than offering any real rest. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair, or at least wake up with a sore back and a newfound respect for modern mattresses. The medieval bed, a status symbol you'll be bragging about to your chiropractor for years to come. Forget romance. Most nights, the royal bedchamber is a cross between a sleepover and a board meeting. There might be a spouse, a small child, a visiting dignitary, 2 lapdogs, and, occasionally, the local bishop. Because why wouldn't you invite the clergy to watch you snore? The idea of the royal bed as a private sanctuary is one of history's better lies. In reality, it's about as exclusive as a public sauna on half-price day. The medieval royal bed was less a place for passionate whispers and more a grand central station of half-dressed courtiers, drooling infants, and small territorial animals. By the time you settle in for the night, you've got more roommates than you did in college, and at least one of them has a tail. Let's start with the obvious, your spouse. Yes, technically the king and queen share a bed, but sharing in the medieval sense mostly means negotiating a treaty over who gets the non-lumpy side. Add a couple of royal children shivering after a nightmare, or just there to secure their claim to parental affection. Medieval castles were drafty, cold, and haunted by at least 6 different types of ghost. Perfect conditions for every child within earshot to appear in the bed around midnight. Picture it. You're dozing off, and suddenly, there's a 6-year-old wedged between you and the wall, a future duke drooling on your shoulder, and a toddler using your elbow as a pillow. But that's just the warm-up. Royalty, by nature, are never truly alone. If there's a visiting noble in the castle, protocol might require you to invite them to sleep in your bed, not as an act of medieval intimacy, but as a gesture of political trust. Sharing a bed was proof that no one was about to be stabbed with a hairpin at 2 a.m. This is how peace treaties, alliances, and the world's most awkward slumber parties were forged. Imagine waking up at 4 a.m. to find the Earl of Westmoreland quietly humming in his sleep, clutching your best pillow, and mumbling about property boundaries. Animals, too, are a fact of royal life. Lapdogs, favored by queens and princesses, treat the bed as their personal domain. Small, spoiled, and equipped with bladders the size of a walnut. These dogs are always present, usually snoring, sometimes stealing your covers, and occasionally starting a brawl with the cat, who was definitely not invited, but refuses to leave. On cold nights, the royal bed could include an entire pack, plus a mysterious ferret that no one claims. but everyone tolerates for its warmth. Then, there's the clergy. You might assume that religious figures keep to their own austere quarters, but you'd be wrong. The local bishop, confessor, or resident monk may sleep in the royal bed, at least until you've discussed that important business about tithes, marriages, or whether it's okay to eat swan on Fridays. It's hard to maintain spiritual authority when you're fighting for blanket territory, but that's the price of medieval power. And let's not forget the night staff. Pages sleeping on the floor just in case. Guards tucked behind curtains, and a nursemaid or two, all pretending to be invisible until needed. There's no do not disturb sign in the royal suite. Just a steady parade of people with business, excuses, and very little regard for your REM cycle. Of course, all these bodies in one bed create challenges beyond just comfort. Someone is always snoring, someone else has cold feet, and there's never enough blanket to go around. The result? A night spent clinging to the edge of the mattress, pondering your life choices, and wondering if the rumors about separate royal bedrooms in France are true. So, if you ever fantasize about being a medieval king or queen, remember, you might get the crown, but you'll also get a bed full of politicians, puppies, priests, and pint-sized heirs, all vying for a piece of the royal quilt. Romance? Maybe tomorrow night, if you can find a moment alone. Before electric blankets, there was the bed warmer, a brass pan full of hot coals. The goal? Warm the mattress, not ignite the entire castle. Most nights, you're 50% warmer, 50% certain you'll wake up to the smell of singed eyebrows. Let's set the scene. It's winter in the royal castle. The stone walls radiate all the warmth of a crypt. The windows rattle in the wind, and your breath comes out in little medieval thought bubbles. Your options for survival are A. Shivering under 12 layers of wool, or B. Trusting your life to the noble, terrifying bed warmer. This clever invention looks like a frying pan married a medieval torture device, a long-handled, lidded brass pan filled with glowing embers from the kitchen hearth and carried up by the most flammable person in the castle, a half-asleep page with a questionable sense of caution. The procedure is straightforward in theory. Gently slip the bed warmer between the sheets. Wave it around like you're chasing out evil spirits, and hope for the best. In practice, it's a test of faith, nerves, and insurance coverage. The page swings the bed warmer with an enthusiasm that suggests he's never seen a linen fire up close. The mattress sizzles, the blankets billow with steam, and the scent of roasted feather rises ominously into the night air. For the uninitiated, here's the physics. Medieval mattresses are basically straw, feathers, and hope, highly flammable and highly unwilling to cooperate with anything hotter than room temperature. Royal bedding may be luxurious, but underneath it's a haystack with delusions of grandeur. The bed warmer is meant to just take the chill off. If you're lucky, that means a cozy, toasty spot right in the center of your mattress. If you're not, it means a smoldering crater and an emergency bucket brigade. The line between comfort and disaster is razor thin and mostly decided by whether your page boy was distracted by a passing cheese tray. But warmth is a valuable currency in a drafty stone palace, so the ritual continues night after night. As you prepare for bed, there's always a moment of suspense. Will tonight be the night you reach peak comfort, or will you invent the phrase housewarming party in the most literal sense? Servants mutter nervous prayers, the queen eyes the bed like it's a military maneuver, and the king reconsiders his will, just in case. And of course, bed warmers have their own etiquette. Too hot? You risk bed warmer stripes. Those suspicious singe marks that tell everyone at court you lost last night's bedding lottery. Too cold? Now you have to answer to the queen, who's convinced you're trying to assassinate her via hypothermia. Everyone has an opinion, from the physician, who recommends a lukewarm pan and 4 extra blankets, to the local friar who suggests more prayers and fewer combustibles. Nobody asks the mattress, but if it could talk, it would beg for early retirement. If you're a guest in the castle, this whole process is even more mysterious. The first time you encounter a bed warmer, you're not sure if you should thank the page, scream, or run for the moat. Is this hospitality or a medieval hazing ritual? You try not to flinch as the pan slides dangerously close to your knees, and you feign gratitude while silently planning your escape route. Despite the hazards, the bed warmer has its defenders. Some swear by its comfort. Others insist it's just a fancy way to keep the servant class on their toes and occasionally on fire. There are always rumors of beds set ablaze, panicked dashes through smoky corridors, and that one infamous Christmas when the Archbishop's nightshirt burst into flames and the choir was woken by the sound of holy shrieking. Still, the bed warmer persists, a symbol of hope, danger, and the medieval refusal to simply be cold. As you settle in, your mattress gently steaming and your eyebrows mostly intact, you realize the real miracle isn't the warmth, it's that anyone in a royal castle ever got any sleep at all. Royal mattresses were supposedly luxurious, meaning stuffed with feathers, horsehair, or if you're unlucky, experimental medieval foam, red moss. Within weeks, it all sags to the middle, and you develop a spine shaped like a question mark. Good luck getting up. Let's begin with the hype. When a medieval mattress arrives at the castle, it's a thing of beauty, plump, inviting, promising dreams of soft comfort. The king might even brag about his goose-down mattress to visiting dignitaries, who nod politely while secretly wondering if theirs is better. But behind the brocade and beneath the monogrammed linens lurks a secret known only to the brave souls who've actually slept on one. Every mattress has a dark side, and it's located dead center. The most prestigious option is, of course, the feather mattress. On day one, you might enjoy something approximating luxury, but give it a fortnight, and the feathers have migrated to the edges, leaving a deep valley in the middle, the royal trench, perfect for collecting loose change, lost jewelry, and sometimes a whole sleeping page boy. This sag isn't just inconvenient, it's a geological feature. You start on your side of the bed, but by morning you and your royal partner have rolled inexorably together, clinging to each other and the last vestiges of comfort. The upside? It's very good for marital relations. The downside? It's also great for accumulating crumbs, pets, and the occasional mouse. Next comes the horsehair mattress. Supposedly, horsehair was chosen for its resilience and springiness, which is a fancy way of saying it never lies flat and always manages to poke you in the ribs at 2 a.m. It crackles ominously when you move and has a distinctive smell somewhere between stable chic and forgotten barn. The king's back might be straight, but his patience? Not so much. The advantage? It's too prickly for bugs to settle in for long. The disadvantage? It's also too prickly for you. If you're really unlucky, or if you're the third son and sleeping in the lesser guest chamber, you'll find yourself atop the dreaded straw mattress. Straw is cheap, abundant, and surprisingly adept at attracting every insect known to medieval science. It's replaced as often as someone remembers, which is to say, infrequently, and only after it begins to sprout. With each passing week, the straw compacts and flattens, turning the mattress into a kind of body-shaped sculpture. Medieval self-care tip. If you wake up with a straw imprint on your face, congratulations, you're part of the decor. But the real wild card in the royal sleep experience? Moss. Some well-meaning advisor, inspired by a woodland stroll, decides that moss will revolutionize sleep technology. It doesn't. Moss is damp, inviting to frogs, and likely to begin growing on you if you don't rotate the mattress regularly. You may dream of fairy tale forests, but you'll wake up in a medieval bog. And don't forget, these mattresses are communal property. The royal mattress might be passed down through generations, blessed by priests, and occasionally aired out by dragging it into the courtyard for a day. If you're a servant, your main job is to fluff, beat, and restuff the mattress with whatever material is available, up to and including leftover table scraps and whatever the royal falcon left behind. As for cleaning, the closest you'll get is a good shake out the window, followed by a quick prayer that nobody is walking underneath. At night, as you finally collapse into your bed of questionable comfort, you're surrounded by the squeaks of the wooden frame, the creaks of ancient straw, and the mournful sighs of the feathers fleeing toward the corners. You try to get comfortable, only to find a suspicious lump that might be last winter's forgotten slipper. And yet, every morning, you rise, stiff, sore but alive, a true survivor of medieval luxury. The royal mattress, less restful retreat, more test of character. If you can get a good night's sleep here, you can handle anything: political intrigue, invading armies, even a surprise visit from your mother-in-law. Sleep tight. You're finally in bed, ready to drift off. Surprise. 3 servants are still in the corner, pretending to adjust the fire but really just taking notes on your snoring. Privacy isn't a concept, it's a myth, right up there with sleeping in. The medieval royal bedchamber at night is never truly empty. Even after the parade of courtiers, bishops and lapdogs has finally shuffled out, there's always a loyal handful of servants lingering in the gloom, each one determined to look busier than the others. They poke at the embers, fluff a pillow that was already fluffed 6 times, and fold linens with such elaborate care you'd think they were weaving a tapestry. Mostly, though, they're there to watch. Whether it's for your safety or their entertainment, no one is quite sure. You lie there, cocooned in a mountain of slightly damp sheets, listening to the subtle rustle of servants going about their night shift. One is supposedly tending the fire, but you're convinced he's memorizing your bedtime rituals for later discussion in the laundry room. Another is dusting the windowsill for the 3rd time tonight, giving frequent, meaningful glances toward the bed, as if he expects you to suddenly produce a goblet of wine from under the covers. The 3rd is polishing the candlesticks and humming a hymn, which only adds to the ambiance of mild anxiety and unasked questions. What you really want, of course, is solitude. To sleep alone, undisturbed, without someone hovering nearby, just in case you decide to reenact the Norman conquest in your sleep. But this is not the modern world. This is the medieval court, where alone time is only for hermits and people lost in the woods. The king's safety is paramount, and so you are provided with a built-in audience, servants, guards, and sometimes the world's sleepiest falconer. It's not just a matter of security. Having servants nearby is considered a status symbol. The more people bustling quietly in the shadows, the more important you are. In fact, on especially grand occasions, you might have to sleep through a small team of footmen standing at attention in full regalia at the foot of your bed, just in case a dignitary drops by at 2 a.m. to talk trade agreements or borrow some sugar. There are, naturally, varying levels of servant attention. If you're the king, you get the deluxe package. 2 pages at the door, a bodyguard slumped on a stool by the wardrobe, and a cupbearer gently snoring behind a curtain, clutching a pitcher of wine for emergencies. If you're a queen, you get handmaidens whispering in Old French, nervously adjusting your blankets every time you sigh, and maybe an elderly nurse ready to provide sage advice or a strongly worded prayer. It's like falling asleep in a bustling, open-plan office, except everyone's pretending you can't hear them. On cold nights, the servants are actually grateful for the job. Royal bedchambers are, after all, the warmest place in the castle. You, however, might find the whole experience slightly unnerving, especially when you're halfway to dreamland and suddenly sense a shadowy figure quietly poking the fire or rearranging your shoes. There is always, without exception, someone awake in your room. You try to relax, but every creak, cough, or suppressed giggle becomes magnified in the darkness. Forget snoring peacefully. You now sleep in defensive formation, one eye open for wandering servants, the other on high alert for someone tripping over the chamber pot. You contemplate asking for more privacy, but rumors about the last monarch to do so end with a missing nightcap and a castle-wide panic. Eventually, the servants do their final security sweep, checking under the bed for assassins, stray cats, or, occasionally, a nervous poet who took a wrong turn after dinner. They snuff out the candles, fluff the last pillow, and finally, after a dozen deep bows, back out of the room. Or so you think. At least one is guaranteed to still be lurking quietly behind the curtain, prepared to leap into action if you so much as sneeze. So yes, you sleep with an audience. Privacy? That's for peasants. In the royal bedchamber, every night is a performance, and you are always on stage, even if you're just dreaming of getting 5 minutes alone. It's 2 a.m. Nature calls. There's no ensuite bathroom, just a beautifully decorated pot that everyone can see. You try to make it across the room without tripping on a dog, a discarded slipper, or your own dignity. Welcome to the medieval royal bedchamber, where nighttime is less about peaceful slumber and more about running a gauntlet designed by history's least considerate interior decorator. Modern convenience? Not here. Instead, behold the chamber pot, an ornate porcelain, silver, or, if it's a tight year for the treasury, slightly dented copper bucket, placed proudly on display for anyone to admire. The more decorative the pot, the higher your status, or, as the court jester likes to say, the more complicated your regrets at 3 a.m. You lie in bed, perfectly cocooned in 10 layers of wool, debating the logistics. The room is pitch black, except for the flickering ember in the hearth. Getting up means braving the icy air, potentially waking the royal lapdog, whose bark will summon half the staff, and announcing to the remaining night servant in the corner that you, ruler of the realm, require the facilities. Privacy? It's just a rumor started by desperate monarchs and quickly squashed by the night staff. You finally make your move, sliding out from the covers with the stealth of a ninja and the grace of someone half asleep and overdressed. Step 1. Locate your slippers. They're never where you left them. Step 2. Shuffle across the floor, trying not to wake anyone. Medieval castles are always full of sleeping bodies. Pages on the rug, dogs on the footstool, someone's emotional support goose near the window. Every step is a negotiation with fate. The chamber pot itself sits in a place of honor, somewhere both highly visible and entirely inconvenient. Do you choose the porcelain one shaped like a lion's head? Or the battered old copper model that's safer but less impressive? Either way, it's not a silent process. Pots are not subtle, and neither are the acoustics in a stone room. With any luck, your movements are muffled by the snoring bishop or the endless crackle of the fire. If not, congratulations. The whole court will know what you had for dinner. Once the deed is done, there's the question of what to do next. In theory, a servant should whisk away the pot immediately, emptying it discreetly before sunrise. In practice, it's often left lurking under the bed, waiting to test the resolve of anyone who gets up before dawn. Some nights, you wake to find a new pot in a new place, as if the servants are running an elaborate, slow-motion obstacle course just to keep you humble. And let's not pretend the chamber pot is risk-free. Medieval floors are uneven, the room is crowded, and you're groggy from a night of questionable ale. Tripping is common, spilling is practically an art form. History does not record how many royal feet were soaked before the invention of the flush toilet. But it's safe to say more than one dynasty nearly ended over a midnight mishap. The worst part? If you do knock the pot over, there's no hiding the evidence. The next morning, servants will whisper, courtiers will smirk, and your accident will be immortalized in a ballad before breakfast. For nobles with an extra sense of adventure, or self-delusion, there's always the option of the garderobe, a small freezing closet that drops your business straight into the moat. It's a lovely solution until winter, when the draft from below could chill your soul, or until you remember that attackers have been known to climb in through the royal waste chute Try explaining that to your spouse at 2:30 a.m. In the end, the chamber pot is a reminder that medieval life didn't pause for anyone, not even a king or queen. It's humbling, inconvenient, and just a little bit terrifying. So next time you make a midnight run to your modern bathroom, spare a thought for your ancestors, tiptoeing through darkness, tripping over livestock, and hoping just this once to keep their dignity intact. Forget gentle sunlight. In the royal bedchamber, your wake-up call is a page with a bell, a trumpet, or occasionally a small but determined rooster. If you're still asleep at dawn, congratulations, you're now late for 7 meetings you didn't agree to. Mornings in the medieval royal household are less about serenity and more about sensory assault. The idea of easing into your day with birdsong and a warm cup of something pleasant does not exist. Instead, imagine a medieval spa day where the only treatment is startle the monarch awake. There's a protocol for this, of course there is, handed down by generations of pages, all of whom take their jobs far too seriously for people wearing tights. First comes the bell. It's not the sweet chime of a distant cathedral, but a handheld iron monstrosity wrung inches from your pillow by a page with the emotional range of a damp cabbage. If that fails to raise you, there's Plan B, the ceremonial trumpet. Nothing says good morning like an out-of-tune blast echoing off stone walls, accompanied by muffled giggles from the younger servants hiding behind the wardrobe. On particularly important days, they bring in the rooster, a bird so traumatized by court life that it crows like it's auditioning for the role of most annoying animal alive. Now, the moment you twitch or groan in response, the real fun begins. Servants descend, bustling in with the speed and subtlety of a marching band. One throws open the curtains, flooding the room with blinding daylight and an Arctic breeze. Another begins poking at the embers in the hearth, ensuring maximum smoke inhalation before breakfast. If you're a queen, your handmaidens arrive with bowls of lukewarm water and approximately 20 questions about your mood, your health, and what color you want your undersleeves. As your brain tries to reassemble itself, a scribe reads the day's schedule in a voice that could peel paint. Your Majesty, today's itinerary begins with prayers, followed by an emergency council meeting about taxes, then an audience with the Duchess of Discontent, a small riot in the bakery, and, time permitting, your own breakfast. Every appointment is a mystery. When did you agree to inspect the new moat drainage system? Who scheduled a poetry recital at 8 a.m.? And why does your mother-in-law have her own meeting block every single day? Meanwhile, courtiers lurk in the doorway, waiting to pounce with urgent whispers or requests for royal signatures. Some arrive early just to score better seating at the breakfast table. Others hover in the hopes of catching you in a vulnerable, pre-coffee state, prime time for asking favors or suggesting small adjustments to their estates, i.e. taking your land. It's not just people either. Royal pets, woken by all the commotion, leap onto the bed, bringing with them fur, fleas, and an assortment of bones collected overnight. Dogs squabble for prime cuddle positions while the court cat, who belongs to no one but judges everyone, gives you the look of someone who would absolutely schedule your meetings better if given half a chance. The worst part? There's no such thing as a snooze button. Trying to go back to sleep is a lost cause. Every page, handmaiden, and valet has orders to keep you vertical. If you do manage to drift off for just a moment, the trumpet will return, more insistent than ever, until you accept your fate and stagger toward the day. By the time you sit up and swing your legs over the edge of the mattress, half the court has already witnessed your bedhead and pajama choices, and the gossip mill is in full swing. You are guided through the rituals of dressing, all while being briefed on matters of state, local gossip, and the ever-growing list of dignitaries waiting to bow in your general direction. And so begins another day as royalty, startled awake, hurried through obligations, and propelled forward by bells, trumpets, and one overzealous rooster. Welcome to the medieval morning, where the only thing louder than your wake-up call is your longing for just 5 more minutes of sleep. Every night in the royal bed is a high-stakes negotiation. Who gets the warm side? Who snores? And who's been banished to the guest mattress for political reasons? Nothing says romance like separate blankets and a room full of witnesses. Forget everything you know about couples' bedtime routines. In the medieval royal bedchamber, there's no such thing as your side and my side. There's only a nightly power struggle that would make the UN blush. Bedding is part love, part chess, and all politics. It begins the moment you approach the bed, trailing an entourage of servants, pets, and whatever relative is currently angling for a raise. First comes the ancient dance over the warm side. The side nearest the fire is a luxury as coveted as tax exemption, and the negotiations are fierce. Some nights, it's decided by rank. King trumps queen, queen trumps visiting cousin, and everyone trumps the bishop, who ends up with the cold, drafty corner. Other nights, it's decided by whoever can get into bed first and burrow so deeply under the covers that moving them would risk a diplomatic incident. Occasionally, the court's official astrologer is called in to determine who is most in need of warmth based on the position of Jupiter and whose birthday it is next. Then there's the snoring. Oh, the snoring. In a royal bed, snoring isn't just a minor annoyance. It's a diplomatic incident. The royal snores echo down the stone corridors, fueling rumors, inspiring lullabies, and sometimes serving as a warning signal for rebellious barons. If the king's snoring, all is well. If he's silent, check for poison. Entire treaties have been adjusted after one spouse threatened to move to the solar just for a night's rest. Occasionally, a noble gets demoted to the guest mattress, a glorified sack of hay on the floor, for political reasons. Translation: the queen needed sleep, and you needed to go. Of course, not every couple enjoys such direct negotiation. Sometimes, separate blankets is less about comfort and more about personal space, also known as the medieval marital boundary. You each have your own woolen blanket, tucked firmly around you, and an unspoken agreement not to cross the line lest you start another 100 Years' War. For modern couples used to heated blankets and king-sized memory foam, this is unimaginable. In the Middle Ages, it's survival. But it gets more complicated. The politics of sleeping arrangements are never just about love. Royal beds are often the scene of nighttime statecraft, with schedules drawn up to determine who's allowed in and when. The Queen's advisors might insist she retire early for her health, which is code for to keep her away from the King's favourite scribe. The King, meanwhile, may have to welcome a visiting ambassador into the bed, yes, really, as a sign of trust, because nothing says diplomatic alliance like sharing a mattress and waking up to the sound of your new ally's teeth grinding. And always, always, there are witnesses. The servants linger, officially to stoke the fire or fetch a midnight drink, but mostly to observe the ongoing soap opera of royal intimacy. Even the pets have opinions. Dogs stake their claim at the foot of the bed, cats wedge themselves between human pillows, and the court falcon insists on his own perch, or else. As for romance, it's not entirely dead, just heavily scheduled and carefully witnessed. A stolen kiss is conducted behind a tapestry, while 3 handmaidens pretend to be asleep and the bishop clears his throat for the 15th time. If the stars align and everyone else falls asleep, there might be a moment for whispered endearments, quick, quiet, and over before the snoring resumes. So next time you complain about blanket hogging or nighttime negotiations, be grateful you're not sharing your bed with a kingdom, a council, and a bishop who sleep talks in Latin. In the medieval world, love and duty are the same thing, and the politics of bedtime are more cutthroat than a tax audit in Lent. Reading before bed? Sure, if you can find someone literate. More likely, you're listening to a courtier recite poetry, a lute player strum something vaguely in tune, or the Queen's cousin tell a story about that time she saw a ghost in the pantry. Evenings in the medieval royal bedchamber are a cross between open mic night and a sleepover you didn't ask for. After the endless ritual of getting undressed, an Olympic event involving 5 people and the removal of 17 layers, you'd think you'd finally get a moment of peace. Instead, you're treated to a lineup of entertainments intended to lull you into a restful state, or at least distract you from the icy drafts and persistent itch of your woolen nightshirt. Let's start with the poetry. There is always someone at court with aspirations of becoming the next Chaucer, and bedtime is the perfect time for them to inflict their latest verses on a captive audience. Picture yourself tucked under a quilt, desperately hoping for sleep, while Sir Roderick stands at the foot of the bed, clearing his throat and launching into a 64-stanza epic about turnip farming or the tragic fate of his favorite goose. Rhyming is optional, and metaphors are compulsory. Occasionally, a clever line earns a polite cough from the Queen or a dog's appreciative yawn. For the most part, though, you listen in silence, praying for a merciful interruption from the next act. Next comes the music. A lute player, possibly the only person in the room more exhausted than you, strums softly in the shadows, eyes half closed and fingers slightly numb from the cold. The melodies are pleasant enough. If you enjoy hearing the same 3 chords on repeat while the instrument drifts in and out of tune, sometimes a harpist joins in, plucking delicate notes that are lost entirely beneath the royal snores and the gentle hum of servants tidying up for the night. If you're very unlucky, someone finds the court bagpipes. That's when the dog leaves, the fire dies, and you seriously consider switching beds with the gardener. Then, of course, there are the stories. Every noble has a ghost story, a tale of miraculous survival, or a suspiciously detailed account of a dream they had involving a swan, a turnip, and the local bishop. The Queen's cousin is a repeat offender, never missing a chance to recount her ghostly pantry encounter, which gets a little more dramatic each night. And then I heard a whisper, just like this, right by the bread basket, she'll say, clutching her pearls and eyeing the loaf suspiciously. The children love it, the bishop pretends not to listen, and you quietly plan to ban bread from the castle just to end the saga. On rare and glorious nights, someone actually reads aloud. The only problem? Books are rare, expensive, and often in Latin. If you're lucky enough to own a volume of fables, it's probably been copied out by a monk who was, frankly, making some of the animals up as he went. You might get half a tale about a clever fox, and then a 20-minute footnote on the dangers of poor penmanship. The best part? If the story's too exciting, you'll be up all night arguing with your spouse about whether the fox deserved to win. For the true insomniacs, there's always gossip, the court's unofficial bedtime story. Servants whisper about the cook's disastrous gravy, pages swap tales of haunted passages, and even the guards at the door quietly debate which member of the council is most likely to fall asleep in a meeting tomorrow. And through it all you lay there, drifting between consciousness and the gentle, persistent chaos of medieval nightlife. Entertainment before bed isn't soothing or even particularly relaxing, but it is familiar, communal, and, in its own bizarre way, comforting. You close your eyes as another stanza begins or the ghost makes its 10th pantry appearance, grateful for the distractions and secretly relieved that, at least tonight, you're not the one on stage. Nightcap can mean a pointy hat or a mug of warm, mildly suspicious ale. Either way, it's the medieval version of melatonin, just with a higher risk of accidental political plotting. Let's start with the hat. The medieval nightcap is, quite simply, the Swiss Army knife of bedtime accessories. It's practical, sure. Designed to keep your ears warm, hide a disastrous case of helmet hair, and signal to everyone in the room that you are, in fact, off duty. The styles range from the dignified and pointy, excellent for poking nosy servants, to the floppy, oversized models that make even the king look like a sulky toddler. Some come with decorative tassels, some with an extra fold to catch candle drips, and all of them have the miraculous ability to slide over your eyes at exactly the moment you need to look awake. No matter your status, the donning of the nightcap is a moment of ceremony. The nightcap attendant, yes, that's a real job, presents the royal cap on a silver tray, holding it aloft with reverence as if it's a holy relic, and not just something that smells faintly of mutton. You place it on your head, everyone bows, and, for a brief, blessed moment, you're free from judgment. Only then do you realize the hat is slightly too tight, and the tassel will spend the next 6 hours slapping you in the face every time you roll over. But hats are only half the story. The other nightcap, the beverage, is where things get truly medieval. Forget herbal teas and fancy lattes. In the royal bedchamber, sleep is encouraged with a mug of whatever's left, simmering in the kitchens. Ale mulled with herbs, a spiced wine, or the ever-popular warm milk with a suspicious hint of goat. Some nights you get a draught so potent it could knock out a jousting horse. Other nights, it's little more than lukewarm dishwater with nutmeg and hope. Nightcaps serve multiple purposes. They take the edge off a day of diplomacy, numb the aches from a mattress stuffed with last season's regrets, and, most importantly, serve as the medieval social lubricant for late-night scheming. There's nothing quite like a sleepy royal council, gathered in their pajamas and sipping mugs of questionable grog to inspire risky ideas. Many a disastrous treaty, secret engagement, and regrettable poetry reading began over a small cup before bed. Of course, there are hazards. Medieval ale is brewed under conditions that would horrify the modern health inspector. If you're lucky, the batch just makes you sleepy. If you're not, you get a night of visions, dreams so vivid you wake, convinced you need to invade France, ban onions, or marry the kitchen maid. These beverages are also famous for provoking the midnight monologue. An hour of heartfelt, barely coherent speech delivered to whichever servant, spouse, or lapdog happens to be closest. If your nightcap is especially strong, it might end with you challenging your own shadow to a duel or swearing off all future tax increases, effective immediately. Let's not forget the politics. The selection of who gets served what nightcap is its own subtle hierarchy. The Queen's cup is always the most fragrant and least suspicious. The King's gets an extra dash of something fortifying. And the visiting Duke's mug is, well, let's just say everyone waits a moment to see if he's still breathing before the next round is poured. Royal taster is not a job for the faint of heart. At the end of the day, the nightcap, whether hat or drink, is less about sleep and more about ritual. It signals the official end of court business, the closing of the royal stage, and the start of a few precious hours of awkwardly negotiated peace. As you settle under the covers, tassel slipping down over one eye, you can't help but wonder, will tonight's dreams be soothing, strange, or just a replay of the Queen's cousin's pantry ghost story, this time with musical accompaniment? Either way, you take one last sip, tug your cap into place, and drift off, knowing that in the medieval world, a good night's sleep is mostly about luck, and just a little bit about what's in your cup. Sleep, optional. The royal bedchamber doubles as a command center after dark. Expect urgent knocks, secret letters, and the occasional emergency meeting about whether the soup at dinner was a little too poisony. Welcome to the midnight boardroom, where your only pajamas are a nightshirt, a crown askew, and a look of growing existential regret. Forget picturing the royal bedchamber as a peaceful oasis for weary monarchs. The truth is, your nights are just as busy as your days, only now you get to experience the thrill of international diplomacy while trying not to drip candle wax on your foot. The routine is as follows. You finally climb into bed, half dreaming of sleep, when there's a soft, frantic knock at the door. A nervous page tiptoes in, eyes wide, bearing a letter sealed with enough wax to start a bonfire. "Urgent, Your Majesty," he whispers, as if the sound won't bounce off the stone walls and rouse every animal and minor noble in a 2-mile radius. You sigh, sit up, and attempt to look kingly, despite wearing a nightcap shaped like a deflated chicken. Night business is never casual. Each message is delivered as if it might change the fate of the realm, or at least your plans for a restful night. Some nights, it's a dispatch from the southern border, raiders, famine, or, worse, news that your cousin in Normandy has changed sides again. Other nights, it's an emergency council, called to debate vital topics like, should the Queen's new perfume be outlawed? Or, was the soup at dinner actually supposed to be blue? Meetings in the bedchamber are awkward affairs. You're perched on the edge of the mattress, blanket wrapped around your knees, as your most trusted advisors file in. The Chancellor recites the latest crop reports while trying not to stare at your woolen slippers. The Bishop offers spiritual counsel, suggesting prayer or possibly more soup. The royal physician weighs in, always with terrible timing. Majesty, you mustn't stress. Would you like a leech? Meanwhile, your spouse sighs heavily, having heard it all before. Occasionally, the business is even more secretive. Spies slip in under cover of darkness, bowing deeply and whispering coded messages. Sometimes they bring actual codes, which you have to decipher on the spot, squinting by candlelight while the Queen mutters about how you're getting crumbs in the bed again. The penalty for falling asleep during spy reports is having to sit through them twice, delivered even more quietly and with more dramatic pauses. Then there's the paperwork. Royal scribes, those poor, sleep-deprived souls, are always hovering in the shadows, ready to thrust a document in your face the moment you start to drift off. Charters must be signed. Proclamations must be sealed. And somewhere in the stack is a formal complaint from the royal falconer about the state of the dovecote. You wonder, not for the first time, if anyone in history has actually finished all their medieval paperwork before breakfast. All the while, your bedchamber is alive with the low hum of state business. Messengers come and go, servants light and relight candles, occasionally setting a curtain on fire just to keep things exciting. The royal lapdog serves as an accidental witness to about half the decisions that shape the future of the realm. At least one noble inevitably falls asleep in a chair, snoring softly until startled awake by a diplomatic crisis or a particularly well-timed draft. Sleep, in this environment, is mostly theoretical. Even if you manage to lay your head on the world's lumpiest pillow, there's no guarantee that the next urgent decision won't require your immediate attention. Peace treaty, war declaration, or yet another discussion of the chamber pot tax. So if you ever envy the life of a medieval monarch, remember, after the feasts and parades, you're left running a kingdom from under a blanket at 2 a.m. Power, prestige, and a chronic lack of sleep. Truly, the medieval trifecta. Royal bedchambers were prime territory for court intrigue. Walls had ears, servants had opinions, and any whispered conversation was halfway to becoming tomorrow's headline. If you think your group chat is dangerous, imagine living in a world where every bedtime whisper could become the latest court scandal before you've even had a chance to finish your sentence. In the medieval castle, gossip spreads faster than the plague, and nowhere is it juicier or riskier than in the royal bedchamber. Here, secrecy is as rare as clean bedsheets, and discretion is a skill possessed only by the dead. Let's start with the walls. Officially, they're made of thick stone, but practically, they're about as soundproof as a wet parchment. Tapestries muffle some noise, but not enough to stop an ambitious page from learning all about last night's diplomatic blunder. Medieval castles are designed for defense, not privacy. Behind every curtain and under every bed lurks the possibility of someone quietly listening, taking mental notes, and planning to monetize the information at tomorrow's breakfast. But it's not just the architecture, it's the people. The average medieval royal bedchamber is a bustling ecosystem of servants, guards, handmaidens, and random visiting nobles who always seem to be in the right place at the wrong time. Every one of them has a stake in the information economy. Servants know that a well-placed tidbit of gossip can buy them a day off or get them out of kitchen duty for a week. Handmaidens whisper secrets as a kind of social currency, trading stories of who tripped over the chamber pot for tales of which lord is secretly afraid of ducks. Then there are the professionals. Every court worth its salt has a few spies, some foreign, some local, all far too good at pretending to dust the windowsill while listening in on royal pillow talk. Sometimes, a so-called cupbearer is really a minor noble in disguise, planted by a rival family to collect the kind of intelligence you just can't get during the day. Others are the classic trusted servants, always nearby, always helpful, always just happening to be within earshot when anything juicy is discussed. Modern bugging devices? Who needs them when your mattress comes with complimentary human surveillance? But gossip isn't just for the underlings. Royals themselves are the worst offenders. Half the intrigue at court begins with a bored princess or an over-caffeinated duke, up late swapping stories about who's been exiled, who's been secretly betrothed, and what the king really thinks about the ambassador from Venice's hat. Even bedtime rituals are political. You never know if your private argument about taxes is about to be relayed, word for word, to the treasurer before sunrise. Of course, all this eavesdropping comes with risks. The punishment for spreading false rumors can be harsh: loss of position, public shaming, or, if you're particularly unlucky, having to recite an apology poem before the whole court. The king's fool, the one person allowed to say the unsayable, often acts as the unofficial news anchor, delivering court updates wrapped in jokes. If you hear your name mentioned during a morning jest, congratulations, your secret is no longer secret. The result? An atmosphere of constant, low-level paranoia. You learn to speak in code, or only when the bedchamber has been triple-checked for lurking listeners. Some royals even develop elaborate systems for signaling to trusted servants. 3 knocks for all clear, 1 candle for stop talking. The bishop's awake. Others just give up, letting the gossip flow and hoping it works in their favor for once. Still, for all the risks and annoyances, there's something oddly comforting about knowing you're never alone, not even in your own bed. The royal bedchamber is more than a place to sleep. It's the nerve center of the entire kingdom's rumor mill. Your pillow may be lumpy, but your secrets are never safe. So, as you drift off surrounded by curtains, courtiers, and people who would sell their own grandmother for a juicy secret, remember, in the medieval world, the only thing more powerful than a crown is a good piece of gossip and someone willing to eavesdrop. The bedchamber was also a makeshift hospital. A king with the sniffles meant herbal remedies, 3 extra pillows, a rotating cast of worried advisors, and a bucket of questionable broth. The moment the monarch so much as sneezed, the entire rhythm of the castle shifted into panic mode. Courtiers tiptoed. Advisors whispered. The royal bedchamber transformed overnight from nerve center to medieval ICU, except with fewer doctors and significantly more incense. The most important question in the realm was suddenly, is it just a chill, or has the king contracted something terminal from the ambassador's handshake? First, the diagnosis. The royal physician, summoned from his chamber at an hour when only cats and ghosts should be awake, bursts into the room wielding a bag of mysterious tools and at least 3 leeches. His medical exam consists of poking your tongue, feeling your pulse with a look of grave concern, and declaring your humors out of balance. You are prescribed a diet of boiled root vegetables, mild hysteria, and, depending on the decade, a pint or 2 of bloodletting. Enter the herbal remedies. Your pillows multiply like rabbits, everyone stuffed with a different mixture of sweet-smelling herbs, lavender to calm, rosemary to ward off evil, and mint for that freshly laundered scent nobody has experienced in decades. Someone hangs garlic from the bedposts. The royal chef is ordered to concoct restorative broths, thick, murky potions full of turnips, bits of mystery fowl, and the hope that at least 1 ingredient is medicinal. You choke down every spoonful under the watchful gaze of 3 advisors, the local bishop, and your personal valet, all ready to record your last words just in case. The cast of caregivers grows by the hour. There's the official physician, the unofficial herbalist. My aunt cured the plague with just parsley and honey. And the Queen herself, swaddled in so many shawls you suspect she's hiding more remedies under there. Even the court jester tries his hand, offering questionable jokes. Why did the peasant cross the road? To get away from the pox that are either healing or hazardous, depending on your mood. If your condition gets worse, the rituals escalate. Hot bricks are wrapped in cloth and placed at your feet. Wet cloths are laid across your brow. Someone recites the names of saints who specialize in nosebleeds. Your room becomes a circus of anxious helpers, all certain their method is best. The priest looms in the corner, just in case things take a spiritual turn. The windows are flung open, unless it's plague season, in which case they're nailed shut. Each new suggestion is delivered with such confidence you begin to believe half the population of the realm is just one sniffle away from sainthood. But the real danger isn't the illness, it's the advice. You must avoid drafts, says one counselor. But also, fresh air cures all, says another. More broth, fewer blankets. Absolutely no apples. Every opinion is delivered with the intensity of a war council. Even the pets weigh in. A loyal dog curling up on your feet for warmth and moral support. The royal cat stalking off in protest because nobody asked her for input. The upside to royal illness is a temporary reprieve from the day's meetings. No early morning trumpet, no tax council, no poetry recitals about turnip farming. The downside? Every other aspect of your life is invaded. People hover by your bedside, hoping for signs of recovery, or occasionally, planning for succession. Your symptoms are discussed in the kitchens, debated in the hallways, and probably worked into at least 3 court ballads before dinner. Eventually, after a week of herbal compresses, uncomfortable poultices, and more broth than you thought humanly possible, you recover, either because of the remedies or in spite of them. Life resumes its relentless pace. The sick room fades back into bedchamber, and you're left with nothing but a collection of empty broth bowls and a renewed respect for modern medicine. So, the next time you reach for a tissue in the middle of the night, give thanks you're not about to trigger a kingdom-wide panic, complete with leeches, saintly invocations, and suspiciously thick soup. Royalty did not escape the age-old battle against things that crawl. No matter how fancy your sheets, expect lice, fleas, and at least one species of bug nobody has identified to this day. In fact, the only thing more consistent than the draft in your royal bedchamber is the presence of tiny roommates, call them the unseen nobility. Each night, as you slip into your grand, velvet-draped bed, you're also joining a sleepover already in progress. Your mattress may be stuffed with goose feathers, but those feathers are as inviting to bedbugs as a royal banquet is to hungry courtiers. Let's start with the lice. They are democracy at its finest. Everyone has them. Peasant or king, child or chancellor, nobody escapes the humble louse's embrace. Servants wage a nightly war with tiny combs, vinegar rinses, and desperate prayers. If you're lucky, you'll only spend half the night scratching your scalp. If you're not, you'll be checking your crown for little passengers come morning. Lice are such a part of life that they even feature in royal correspondence. Your Majesty, I regret to inform you the ambassador's son brought an exciting new strain with him from Navarre. Then, the bedbugs. Small, resilient, and vindictive, they thrive in the warm, dark crevices of the royal mattress. They wait patiently for the lights to go out, then launch their midnight feasts on any exposed patch of skin. You can flick, brush, or threaten them with holy water. It doesn't matter. They always come back. Rumor has it that entire treaties have been renegotiated at 3 a.m. after a noble awoke, covered in welts, and swore eternal vengeance on the Duchy of Burgundy and their suspiciously smug-looking mattress stuffer. Let's not ignore the fleas. While lapdogs and cats add charm and the occasional foot warmer to the royal bed, they also carry their own loyal entourage of jumpy, hungry pests. Waking up to find a flea circus in your sheets is so common that the phrase "itchy as a king in July" becomes a staple of the court jester's routine. The queen might bathe in rosewater, the king might sprinkle lavender on his pillows, but the fleas remain ambitious, resilient, and utterly unimpressed by nobility. And then, the true wild cards. Those bugs that defy identification. No one knows where they come from or what they want. Some are small and harmless looking. Others have too many legs and a questionable attitude. There are whispered stories among the servants about the midnight beetle or the castle tick. Mysterious creatures seen only by candlelight, and always moving just out of swatting range. The official line? They're good luck, unless, of course, they bite. Dealing with these creatures becomes a nightly ritual. Servants flip mattresses, beat them within an inch of their life, and air them out in the courtyard, right next to the laundry and the occasional wandering peasant. Herbal sachets, lavender, mint, rue, are tucked into every pillowcase, promising more scent than actual results. If you're feeling brave, you might attempt the full linen change, which involves at least 6 people, 4 arguments, and a sudden rainstorm halfway through. Still, the bugs always find their way home. The royal physician recommends all sorts of remedies: vinegar rubs, salt scrubs, magical charms, and the ever-popular "just try not to think about it." Meanwhile, gossip spreads about which royal has the worst infestation, and bets are quietly placed on who will be the first to break and demand a new mattress. The king, for his part, pretends not to notice, but the court jester never misses a chance. Why did the queen bring a comb to bed? To negotiate peace with her scalp. Despite all this, life goes on. You scratch, you grumble, you develop an impressive immunity to discomfort. The truth is, sharing your bed with the insect kingdom is just another quirk of royal existence. Like lumpy pillows, noisy courtiers, and the ever-present possibility of stepping in the chamber pot. So as you drift off, serenaded by the gentle scratching of your fellow bedfellows, remind yourself. History's great monarchs faced war, famine, and intrigue, and still managed to survive a night in their own beds. Surely you can handle a little itchiness. Sleep was often accompanied by flickering candlelight and a constant fear that one wrong move would set the entire castle ablaze. The only thing more dangerous than medieval politics? Medieval lighting. You'd think that the royal bedchamber, bastion of all things luxurious, would have mastered the simple art of illumination. But in reality, nighttime lighting in the castle was less mood lighting and more annual risk assessment. Forget the cozy glow of string lights or the subtle click of a bedside lamp. In medieval times, you went to bed with the gentle knowledge that your last act before sleep could very well be setting off a multi-alarm disaster. The options were limited, and each came with a side of existential dread. The most common choice: beeswax candles, hand-dipped and slightly lopsided, perched in heavy, ornate holders. If you were lucky, the candle burned steadily, throwing a soft yellow light across the tapestries. If you weren't, the flame flickered violently, casting monstrous shadows on the walls and making you jump at the sight of your own nightcap. Some candles dripped hot wax onto your knuckles or the bedding, creating a patchwork of medieval battle scars, every burn a memory. If the treasury was tight, you might find yourself squinting at the feeble glow of a tallow candle made of animal fat, prone to sputtering, and famous for filling the room with a smell that can only be described as year-old stew meets livestock panic. The servants swore by oil lamps for a steady light, but they smoked, leaked, and left stains that became conversation pieces for years. One accidental elbow, and you had oil everywhere, a slip hazard for dignitaries, a treasure trove for bugs, and a ticking time bomb for fire. No matter your light source, everyone knew the rules. Keep it away from the curtains, heavy velvet, deliciously flammable. Never fall asleep with a candle burning, unless you fancied waking up outdoors. And always appoint at least 2 people as official candle monitors. Their job? Watch the flame, catch drips, and when the candle inevitably toppled, run for the bucket of sand by the door, assuming someone remembered to fill it that day. Of course, lighting a room wasn't just about safety. It was also about status. The more candles on display, the richer and more important you appeared. A truly impressive royal chamber might have dozens of candles burning at once, each one another chance to turn bedtime into a bonfire. If a visiting noble happened to mention how bright and cozy your rooms seemed, you'd nod modestly while hoping they didn't notice the scorch mark by the window where last week's ambiance went rogue. All these flames attracted more than just attention. Moths, gnats, and every flying thing in the kingdom made a nightly pilgrimage to your bedside. Flickering light, fluttering wings, the occasional thud of a doomed bug hitting your pillow. It's a symphony that makes modern white noise machines sound like child's play. But nothing compares to the legendary castle fire drills, which mostly involved panicked shouting and a stampede for the stairs. The worst offenders were, naturally, the candlelit bedtime readers. Many a chronic insomniac met their match not from boredom but from an overturned candle during a particularly gripping chapter of Lives of the Saints. Legends abound of brave footmen hurling flaming pillows out the window, of duchesses rescuing their favorite lapdog from the smoke, and of the king himself, seen once in his underthings, leading the bucket brigade. So you learn to be cautious. You snuff every candle but one before closing your eyes. And you position it at a strategic distance, far from the bed, but close enough to chase away the imagined ghosts in the corners. You pray that tonight, at least, everyone remembers to put out their lamps, and as the last candle gutters and the room plunges into darkness, you realize, in the medieval castle, nothing is more reassuring than the sudden blessed absence of light, at least until someone invents the light bulb. In the Middle Ages, dreams were serious business. Every odd vision could be a prophecy, a warning, or just the result of eating too much cheese. Best not to mention that dream where you married a goose. If you think your weirdest dreams are embarrassing, try living in a time when forgetting your pants in a dream meant you might accidentally cause a famine, or at least offend 3 saints. The medieval court was obsessed with what went on behind closed eyelids. Every morning began with not just breakfast, but a full debrief of everyone's dreams, conducted with the gravity of a royal inquest. If you dreamt of rain, the farmers wanted to know if it would bring a good harvest. If you dreamt of fire, the castle's night watch would double their rounds. If you dreamt of dancing sheep, expect a bishop to spend the day muttering prayers over your pillow. The interpretation of dreams was a full-time job for some people. Priests, astrologers, and professional dream readers would gather around, offering interpretations with all the certainty of a weather forecast. Dreamt of a snake? Danger ahead. Or maybe just an unlucky cousin visiting. Saw gold in your dream? Prosperity. Unless you woke up with a toothache, in which case it was just greed. Woke up sweating from a nightmare. That could be a warning about enemies, or perhaps a sign you'd been hogging the blankets again. And then there were the nightmares. Sleep wasn't just a break from politics and bedbugs. It was also a minefield of terrifying visions. Medieval people believed that night demons, called mare or night hags, would sit on your chest and give you bad dreams. Something you might have described as sleep paralysis, but which the royal physician described as obviously the work of mischievous sprites and a lack of proper bedtime prayers. To ward off these unwelcome guests, people tucked iron knives under their pillows, slept with holy relics beside their beds, or, if you were especially anxious, refused to fall asleep at all. The record for the longest sleepless streak was held by the Duke of Wiltshire, who once stayed awake for 3 nights after a particularly ominous cheese-induced vision. Food and dreams were inextricably linked in the medieval mind. Everyone knew that eating onions before bed would make you dream of weeping widows, while too much pork produced visions of piglets running through the throne room. Cheese, as always, was blamed for everything from love affairs to the collapse of small bridges. If a queen woke in the night, frowning and muttering about a field of angry swans, the entire kitchen would be banned from dairy for a week. Dreams could also serve as useful excuses. Didn't want to go to mass? I dreamt of disaster. Better stay home. Worried about your upcoming taxes? Last night I saw black clouds. Clearly, the Treasury should delay collections. On the other hand, a pleasant dream was cause for celebration, especially if it featured an ancestor, a talking dog, or a mysterious stranger handing you a turnip, a well-known symbol of good luck and fiber. Of course, sharing your dreams was a political act. The wrong story to the wrong listener could spark rumors, while the right dream at the right breakfast could earn you allies. Royals learned to edit their nocturnal confessions, leaving out the part about flying over the castle in their underpants and focusing instead on more dignified visions, like vanquishing rivals or receiving wisdom from a glowing saint. But perhaps the most relatable medieval tradition was simply laughing off the weirdest dreams. Even the king, after a night haunted by visions of his mother-in-law chasing him with a wooden spoon, could expect the jester to turn it into tomorrow's comic relief. Because in the end, whether your dreams were prophecy, warning, or just indigestion, everyone woke up to the same cold bedchamber, the same lumpy mattress, and the same blessed chaos of another medieval day. So tonight, don't worry about your dreams unless you see a goose in a wedding veil. Then, by all means, sleep with one eye open. For queens, the bedchamber was a battlefield, negotiating privacy, dodging in-laws, and fending off a steady stream of gossip. If you ever wanted alone time, you'd better invent the concept. Forget the romantic notion of the queen's chamber as a scented, sun-drenched sanctuary. In reality, it was as private as the village square on market day, just with better curtains and more embroidery. Every evening, as the door closed and the guards took their posts, a whole new wave of guests would arrive. First came the trusted handmaidens, each with an opinion about your hairstyle, your wardrobe, and whether or not you should eat that last marzipan. Then came the ladies-in-waiting, ready to relay the latest court scandal with the speed and enthusiasm of a medieval news network. Privacy was a unicorn, much discussed, never seen. There was always someone lurking, ostensibly to help with brushing your hair or fastening your nightdress, but really just to report on whether you rolled your eyes at the king's new beard. The queen's mother-in-law popped in regularly, ostensibly to offer advice. Don't forget, dear, a true queen always rises before sunrise, but mostly to check if you were writing letters home or plotting to avoid tomorrow's embroidery marathon. And then, of course, the politics of the bedchamber. The queen's bedroom was a power hub. Every pillow fluff, every nightcap, every prayer at the bedside watched and, inevitably, discussed over breakfast. The placement of your slippers could be interpreted as a political statement. If you wore a blue nightgown instead of the red one gifted by the king's aunt, it might launch a week of speculation. Did the queen slight her powerful in-law? Was she cold? Was she signaling that she wanted more autonomy, or simply that she hated the color red? No one knew, but everyone had an opinion. Even sleep was public. On important nights, like royal births, treaty signings, or whenever the king felt like visiting, the bedchamber would be full of witnesses. Physicians, noblewomen, and the ever-present priest, all standing by just in case history decided to happen while you were in your nightdress. Giving birth in the Middle Ages meant laboring in front of a crowd large enough to form a decent soccer team, all of them muttering prayers and giving helpful advice that was mostly just panicked shouting. Alone time? only if you counted the minutes spent staring at the ceiling while everyone else whispered in the corner. For queens, friendship was complicated. Your ladies-in-waiting were supposed to be your closest confidants, but each one had family ties, secret alliances, and ambitions of her own. Every secret shared was a potential headline. Even the servants were career court reporters, collecting tidbits to pass on to their next employer or to the kitchen staff, who would know the entire court's business by sundown. On rare occasions, a queen might claim solitude under the guise of prayer or illness, retreating behind the heavy bed curtains to breathe in peace and try to remember what her own voice sounded like. But even then, someone was likely to knock, bringing a midnight message, a medicinal potion, or just the urgent question, "Your Majesty, do you prefer the rose-patterned sheets or the lilies for tomorrow's bedding?" As if a sheet pattern could save you from the parade of people, animals, and expectations marching through your chamber. Still, there were small victories, a few stolen moments by candlelight, a private laugh with a trusted handmaiden, a quiet song hummed when you thought no one was listening. These fleeting oases of privacy were enough to keep a queen sane, even as the fishbowl walls closed in and every move became fodder for tomorrow's gossip mill. So, next time you long for the life of royalty, remember the queens. For them, the greatest luxury wasn't gold or jewels. It was just 5 blessed minutes with the door locked and everyone else on the other side. Some nights, the royal bed is overrun with children, crying, kicking, and occasionally bartering for bedtime stories. Just try sleeping through a 6-year-old with night terrors and a wooden sword. Forget romantic notions of peaceful royal slumber. In the medieval bedchamber, nighttime is just the second act of the royal family's ongoing circus, and the children are the headline act. The king and queen might command armies, negotiate treaties, and inspire awe in the great halls. But in their own bed, they are powerless before the restless squadrons of small, determined offspring. It usually starts innocently enough. A quiet knock at the door, the hesitant whisper of a night nurse, and suddenly a pajama-clad child is being escorted into the royal sheets, clutching a ragged stuffed animal or a highly suspect wooden knight. The reasons are always the same. I heard a noise. I had a bad dream. Or, most commonly, the cat took my pillow and now she won't give it back. You try to be gracious, you really do, but soon enough, one child becomes 2, then 3, then a full-blown invasion of tiny feet and elbows. Once admitted, the royal children take up positions with the tactical precision of battle-hardened generals. The youngest curls into the queen's side, clutching her sleeve with an iron grip. The eldest, already angling for more power, claims the warm side nearest the fire. In the middle, a squirmy future count thrashes about, limbs everywhere, rehearsing for a future in professional jousting. If you thought negotiating blanket space with a spouse was tough, try doing it with a toddler who believes in the divine right of first snuggle. Of course, with children come stories, lots of them. Every night is another round of, "Tell us about the dragon you saw, Papa," or "Sing the lullaby, Mama." But not the sad one about the lost sheep. It makes Henry cry. You summon your best courtly storytelling voice and attempt to keep things upbeat. There's an unspoken competition among the siblings to ask the most absurd question. Can horses climb ladders? Has anyone ever been knighted by a chicken? And woe betide the parent who doesn't have answers. No matter how riveting your tale, at least one child will fall asleep halfway through, drooling gently onto the royal nightgown. Another will develop an urgent need for water, which must be fetched by a servant, who then wakes the dog, who then wakes the bishop sleeping in the corner. Somewhere in the chaos, someone's wooden sword gets lost in the sheets, only to be rediscovered at 2 a.m., with the business end pointed directly at your ribs. Did we mention the nightmares? In the Middle Ages, the combination of scary stories, real-life anxieties, like "Will I ever become king?" or "Is the cat really a witch?" and an abundance of cheese before bed meant that night terrors were a frequent visitor. When the shrieks come, and they always do, the entire castle wakes. Handmaidens rush in with soothing words. Courtiers debate the cause. And the jester makes a note for tomorrow's routine. Then there are the bartering attempts. Small princes and princesses, wise beyond their years, offer everything from half a crust of bread to their least favorite sibling's favorite toy in exchange for just 5 more minutes awake. The negotiations are tense, rivaling any treaty signed in the Great Hall. The royal parents, exhausted, sometimes give in, and sometimes enforce bedtime with the grim resolve of a monarch facing invasion. By dawn, the royal bed looks like a battlefield. Pillows everywhere, blankets tangled, at least one child snoring on top of the covers, and 2 parents clinging to the edges with that glazed look of survivors. The court enters, surveying the scene, and nods. Another night survived in the wilds of parenthood. So, the next time you picture medieval royalty, don't imagine only crowns and jewels. Remember the chaos of the royal bed. Part playground, part diplomatic zone. All love, sticky fingers and all. Hosting foreign nobles? Prepare for awkward conversations about who gets which side of the bed, which dogs are allowed under the covers, and why the Earl of Warwick keeps hogging all the pillows. There's no greater test of medieval diplomacy than the overnight royal sleepover. Forget the tense negotiations in the council chamber. Those are nothing compared to sorting out the sleeping arrangements when you have a guest noble or 2 or 3 thrown into the royal bedchamber mix. In an era before the concept of guest rooms with little soaps and do not disturb signs, visiting VIPs often shared space, and sometimes mattresses, with their hosts. It's equal parts bonding experience and public relations minefield. First, there's the matter of bed selection. In theory, the king and queen have first dibs on the royal mattress. In practice, protocol sometimes demands sharing to cement alliances or reassure important guests that no one is about to assassinate anyone in the night. This means you might find yourself wedged between your spouse, your least favorite cousin, and the Duke of Burgundy, who snores like a malfunctioning bellows and insists on sleeping with his ceremonial boots on. Sorting out who sleeps where quickly becomes a roundtable discussion of etiquette and passive-aggressive hints. The French ambassador claims the warm side. The Earl of Warwick eyes the pile of pillows with predatory intent, and the Queen's third cousin tries to subtly nudge everyone else toward the drafty side near the window. If you thought reserving a poolside chair at a modern resort was cutthroat, you've never seen 5 nobles jostle for the spot farthest from the chamber pot. Then, there are the animals. Medieval nobility rarely travel light. Lapdogs, falcons, and the occasional therapy goose all demand sleeping privileges. Before long, the bed resembles a petting zoo, with dogs burrowing under blankets, cats claiming the pillows, and one extremely confused squire trying to coax a rooster out from under the mattress. Any hope of a good night's sleep is dashed by barking, squawking, and the mysterious thump of something with feathers settling in at your feet. Of course, the pillow politics are legendary. Every noble has a preference, and alliances shift throughout the night as pillows are traded, hoarded, and on at least one infamous occasion, used as a bargaining chip for an extra slice of midnight cheese. The Earl of Warwick is notorious for deploying his unique brand of pillow diplomacy, falling asleep with a death grip on at least 3, leaving everyone else to improvise with rolled-up tunics and creative folding. And what about bedtime rituals? Every court has its own traditions, and when these collide, chaos reigns. The Spanish envoy insists on reciting 7 prayers before sleep. The Venetian wants the windows wide open for the healthful air, and the Irish baron tells ghost stories so alarming that the bishop requests an emergency exorcism. Meanwhile, the kitchen staff delivers a midnight snack, a stew of unknown origin, prompting a heated debate over who should taste it first. Sleep, if it comes, is fragile and brief. At least one guest will talk in their sleep, Another will try to negotiate land rights while dreaming, and everyone will wake repeatedly, unsure if that noise in the corridor is an assassin or just the Duchess of Flanders looking for her slippers. By dawn, the room smells like victory, defeat, and a hint of wet dog. In the morning, everyone rises groggy but determined to pretend they slept well. The night's dramas are quickly converted into polite breakfast conversation and, eventually, immortalized in satirical ballads sung by the court jester. International relations may have been advanced, but personal space was most definitely sacrificed. So the next time you have a house guest and fret over pillowcases, remember, at least you're not mediating a pillow war between Warwick and Burgundy with a goose as a referee. Medieval hospitality, not for the faint of heart or light of sleeper. If you think sharing your bed with a dog is modern, think again. Medieval royals filled their chambers with lapdogs, cats, and the occasional falcon. Because what better way to say I'm powerful than a night of sleep next to a bird of prey? In the medieval world, pets weren't just accessories. They were status symbols, comforters, conversation starters, and, occasionally, highly inconvenient nocturnal alarm systems. Each royal had their preferences. The Queen's lapdogs, curled like furry question marks at the foot of the bed. The King's dignified hunting hounds, sprawled across expensive tapestries. The Princess's cat, who had decided the warmest spot in the chamber, was always wherever someone had just tried to sit down. The lapdog reigned supreme among the royal pet hierarchy. Small, pampered, and infinitely judgy, these dogs had more accessories than most human courtiers. Velvet collars, silver combs, even embroidered pillows of their very own. Their primary job was to look adorable and provide a handy excuse for the Queen to avoid awkward conversations. Sorry, I can't discuss taxes, the dog needs her evening brush. But come nighttime, lapdogs were relentless blanket thieves, tunneling under the covers and emerging only to bark at the bishop or steal bites of midnight cheese. The phrase, "let sleeping dogs lie," had to be invented for a reason. Then there were the cats, quietly running their own parallel court from the shadows. Every queen needed a cat, not for mouse hunting, though that was a bonus, but for the sense of mystery and superiority a cat brought to the royal image. Cats prowled across windowsills, slunk behind curtains, and, most important, claimed the choicest sleeping spots. Forget keeping them off the bed. It was their bed. You were simply a warm, occasionally snoring obstacle. On cold nights, a determined feline might squeeze under the covers, purring like a well-oiled tapestry loom and settling for a nap on your chest, regardless of your breathing needs. Of course, not all pets were fluffy or cuddly. This was the age of falconry, after all, and it wasn't unusual for a prince or ambitious courtier to stroll into the bedchamber trailing a feathered, talon-equipped friend. Imagine drifting off to sleep with a hawk glaring at you from the bedpost, waiting for any sudden movement that might suggest small rodent energy. It was the medieval equivalent of a high-security alarm. Nothing kept nosy servants in line, like the threat of being pecked by the king's favorite bird of prey. On especially lively nights, the bedchamber became a miniature menagerie. Dogs snored, cats yowled, falcons flapped in their sleep, and somewhere in the chaos, a stray ferret or two might wriggle into the laundry pile. The more pets in your room, the more impressive your status, or at the very least, your tolerance for nocturnal mayhem. But pet politics were real. Which dog got the warmest corner? Whose cat knocked over the candle? What to do when the visiting French noble's parrot started reciting last year's tax scandal at 2 a.m.? Royalty learned to navigate these delicate negotiations with more care than any treaty. Entire evenings could be derailed by a dogfight over a mutton bone or a cat deciding to chase a mouse under the bishop's feet during evening prayers. Of course, there were advantages. Pets provided warmth, entertainment, and the world's oldest excuse for a bad night's sleep. It wasn't me snoring, it was the hound. They also gave the royals a bit of genuine affection in a world full of plotting, gossip, and awkward state dinners. No amount of political maneuvering could compete with the comfort of a purring cat, or the steadfast, if slightly drooly, love of a loyal lapdog. So as you settle into your royal bed, half smothered by pets and serenaded by the midnight yowls of your private menagerie, remember, power isn't just about crowns and castles. It's about who gets the best spot under the covers. In the medieval world, even the most powerful ruler had to negotiate with a lapdog. Every bedtime ended with rituals, prayers, holy relics tucked under pillows, and enough crossing of oneself to make the local priest nervous. You don't just hope for good dreams, you beg for them. In the medieval royal bedchamber, nightfall was less about relaxation and more about defense, against everything from nightmares to demons to suspicious drafts. The transition from evening chaos to supposed tranquility followed a script older than most family feuds, blending faith, superstition, and a pinch of magical thinking into the bedtime routine. It always began with prayer. For a royal, the pre-sleep ritual meant kneeling at the bedside, or, if feeling especially pious, on the freezing flagstones, surrounded by flickering candles and the soft murmur of servants pretending not to eavesdrop. The prayers were long, thorough, and highly personalized. Appeals for protection, forgiveness, good harvests, a decisive win at tomorrow's chess match. And, if you were the queen, a plea that your mother-in-law would develop laryngitis. These prayers weren't just recitations. Every family member had their own additions. A child prayed for fewer nightmares. The king added a request for political luck. The jester quietly asked that the queen's lapdog find a new favorite pillow. You crossed yourself so many times your arm went numb. Each motion reinforcing the invisible shield meant to hold back whatever nightmares, evil spirits, or sneaky taxes might be lurking in the darkness. Then came the relics. For the royal family, this meant a personal collection of holy objects, a sliver of saintly bone, a scrap of blessed cloth, a miniature vial of holy water. These were tucked under pillows, stashed in nightstands, or, on especially ominous nights, worn around the neck like medieval dream catchers. Servants circulated with sprigs of rosemary or lavender, tucking them into every corner for extra protection. Was it effective? Debatable. Did it make everyone feel better? Absolutely. Not all rituals were strictly religious. Some were pure superstition, handed down through generations and reinforced by every nervous nursemaid. A shoe placed under the bed, toe facing the door, would confuse any witches thinking of paying a visit. Mirrors were covered to keep the soul from wandering during sleep, and to avoid the horror of seeing your own bedhead at midnight. Bread crusts might be hidden near the headboard to appease household fairies. The royal astrologer occasionally made a surprise visit, burning strange herbs to purify the air, which mostly just gave everyone watery eyes and more fuel for tomorrow's gossip. For the insomniacs, the rituals grew ever more creative. Special lullabies, half song, half prayer, filled the chamber with their droning reassurance. Stories of saints and heroes were whispered in the dark, not so much to entertain as to distract from the groans of settling timbers and the ominous scratching of mouse claws behind the tapestries. At least one handmaiden was always ready to recite a blessing, her words a blend of Latin, local dialect, and personal improvisation, Saint Martha. Keep away the bedbugs and the Lord's cousin Reginald, Amen. No matter how many rituals you performed, there was always the underlying anxiety of medieval nights. Outside, the castle was full of creaks and sighs, unexplained chills, and the occasional howl from a dog or, if luck failed, a drunken guard. The fear of the unknown pressed in from every direction, so you held onto your rituals tightly, convinced that one more Hail Mary or the right arrangement of socks could tip the balance in your favor. Finally, when the last candle was snuffed and the final prayer whispered, you settled into your lumpy, well-defended bed, surrounded by a fortress of faith, hope, and herbal sachets. You might not have been guaranteed good dreams, but at least you could sleep knowing you'd done everything possible to keep the darkness at bay. So, Next time you tuck yourself in and flip on your nightlight, remember, even kings and queens needed their bedtime rituals to survive the night. And so do we, in our own, slightly less dramatic way. At dawn, the royal bedchamber transforms back into a hive of activity. Servants bustle in, robes are arranged, and your first meeting of the day is a reminder that in the medieval world, there is no such thing as sleeping in. Forget snooze buttons or just 5 more minutes. The concept of sleeping in was as foreign to medieval royalty as indoor plumbing. The moment the faintest sliver of light crept through the arrow-slit windows, the castle came alive with purpose. Someone, somewhere, always had a job to do, preferably in your bedroom, preferably before you'd had a chance to remember your own name. Your first sensation is usually confusion. Why is there a footman opening the curtains? Why is someone gently, or not so gently, shaking your foot? Why does the room smell like burnt toast and last night's incense? You crack one eye open, only to be met by a small army of servants bustling in and out, each one determined to make the royal wake-up process look like a well-rehearsed ballet. Even as they trip over dogs, misplace slippers, and fumble with a dressing gown that definitely doesn't belong to you. The royal morning routine is an event in itself. Pages arrive carrying trays of lukewarm water for washing, bowls of something porridge adjacent for breakfast, and, if you're lucky, a half-hearted attempt at coffee, which tastes suspiciously like boiled despair. Valets bring an endless parade of garments, debating which robe best matches your morning face. Your handmaidens whisper in corners, reporting on the weather, the latest castle gossip, and who cried out in their sleep last night. Spoiler, it was probably the Earl of Warwick, again. Before you can gather your wits, someone is already reading out the day's schedule. It's delivered in a tone that suggests everything is equally urgent. Prayers, council meetings, an inspection of the guard, a lecture from your mother-in-law on the virtues of punctuality, and, of course, the endless processions of people who just need a moment of your time before breakfast. If you ever thought you'd get to ease into your day as royalty, think again. The medieval world runs on chaos, tradition, and the unspoken rule that every morning must begin with mild panic. You're dressed with an efficiency that borders on competitive sport. Shirts, hose, tunics, and more layers than a lasagna. Someone fastens your shoes while another fluffs your pillow for good luck. If you're a queen, add a complicated headpiece and at least 3 rounds of debate about which necklace projects the right level of morning authority. If you're a king, brace yourself for an early morning summary of the kingdom's livestock inventory and an update on the ongoing war over who gets the warm seat at the council table. Meanwhile, the bedchamber fills with an audience. Not just servants, but courtiers, advisors, bishops, and occasionally the court jester, who's always looking for fresh material. Everyone seems to have an opinion about your night's sleep. Your Majesty, you look well rested, they'll lie. Your Grace, you tossed and turned so much we feared an earthquake. Even the pets join in. Dogs wagging, cats glaring, and one persistent falcon who refuses to leave your shoulder until you've promised a morning stroll. Somehow, you make it to the ceremonial exit from the bedchamber. This is less a private moment and more a daily parade, complete with robes, advisors, and the occasional lost child clutching a toy sword. As you pass through the doorway, you catch a final glimpse of the bed, already being remade by expert hands, ready to endure another night of courtly madness. And thus begins the day, abruptly, noisily, and with no regard for your dreams of a leisurely morning. In the medieval castle, sleep is fleeting, privacy is non-existent, and the dawn is always the start of another royal performance. So, next time your alarm goes off, be grateful it's just a noise and not a small army at the end of your bed. In the world of medieval royalty, morning person isn't a personality, it's a survival tactic. The king's snoring isn't just a personal problem, It's a geopolitical event. Every grunt and rattle is dutifully noted by the chamberlain. And there's a real risk a neighboring duke might declare war if kept up all night by the royal sleep trumpet. Medieval solutions include herbal teas, earplugs made of beeswax, and, if all else fails, assigning a monk to pray the noise away. In the world of medieval royalty, bedtime is never truly private, and every sound is subject to analysis, interpretation, and, on especially dramatic nights, an emergency council meeting. The king's nocturnal rumblings aren't simply the stuff of pillow talk. They are the background music of an entire court, echoing through stone corridors and bouncing off the suits of armor that line the hallways. Court life is noisy at the best of times, but nothing compares to the royal snore, a phenomenon so powerful it could send tremors through the guest wing and startle the night guard out of his mid-shift nap. The snoring itself is legendary. Chronicled in everything from court poetry to international dispatches, the King's Nightly Symphony is a complex layering of wheezes, whistles, and the occasional victorious honk. The Queen has developed an immunity over the years, rolling over with the resigned grace of someone who's seen 5 invasions and 3 new tax laws. Lesser nobles and visiting dignitaries, however, are not so lucky. The French ambassador is said to have composed an entire treaty at 3 a.m., simply because he couldn't sleep, while the Earl of Warwick swears he lost half his hair during an especially loud bout of snore diplomacy. No effort is spared to contain the nightly spectacle. The royal physician prescribes teas brewed from obscure herbs with names like sleepywort and quietroot, but they mostly taste like disappointment and damp socks. The Queen's ladies-in-waiting suggest sleeping in different positions, different beds, or even different wings of the castle, but the king remains loyal to his lumpy mattress and familiar pillow. A few resourceful souls experiment with beeswax earplugs, specially crafted and ceremoniously inserted before bed, though most are lost to the folds of the mattress or carried off by curious lapdogs. As a last resort, spiritual solutions are attempted. On nights when the snoring threatens to shake loose the rafters, a monk is summoned to recite prayers at the bedside, invoking the intervention of every saint with a history of sound management. The results are mixed. Some nights, the prayers seem to soften the sound, while others see the snoring rise to such volume that it drowns out the closing hymn in the chapel below. Rumor has it that one particularly devout friar nearly achieved sainthood after staying awake through an entire week of royal snore storms. The consequences extend far beyond personal discomfort. Diplomatic relations hinge on sleep quality. If visiting nobles are kept awake, negotiations the next day become testy and more likely to end with someone storming out over breakfast. Entire feuds have begun over a poorly timed snore. Alliances have been solidified by the shared trauma of a sleepless night. Spies gather intelligence not only from overheard secrets, but also from the pattern and pitch of royal snores. The king sounds congested. Perhaps now is the time to propose that marriage treaty. And, of course, the court jester never misses a chance to add to the legend. His morning routines often include reenactments of the night's most dramatic moments, complete with trumpeting and a well-timed pillow over the head. The servants place bets on how many minutes into the night the first rattle will start, and the palace cats have learned to sleep on the far side of the bed, safe from the sonic onslaught. So, if you find yourself grumbling about your partner's gentle snoring, remember, in the medieval royal bedchamber, a bad night's sleep could topple treaties, change the course of history, or, at the very least, launch 1,000 jokes. A king's snore isn't just noise, it's a matter of national security. There's no AC, no central heating, just roaring fires in winter, and the world's thickest curtains in summer, both equally likely to cause fainting. In July, you marinate in a 4-poster sweat lodge. By January, you sleep in so many layers you could be mistaken for a laundry basket with a crown. Whichever the season, comfort is a myth, and the drafts are personal. Medieval royalty learned to fear the change of seasons with an intensity usually reserved for plagues and tax collectors. The only thing predictable about the royal bedchamber climate was its unpredictability. Every year, just as you settled into a tolerable sleep rhythm, nature delivered its annual reminder. You live in a stone box with all the insulation of a damp biscuit. Let's start with winter. The grand roaring fire seems like a good idea, until you realize it only warms the 4 feet directly in front of it. The rest of the room remains a frozen tundra, fit for the storage of leftover venison and household grudges. Your bed, positioned optimistically near the flames, is draped in so many layers of velvet, wool, and whatever the court tailor found in the attic, it resembles a small fabric mountain. Climbing into it requires a team effort, a detailed map, and occasionally a rescue rope. Of course, all those layers are necessary. The stone walls exhale cold drafts with malevolent glee, finding every gap in the tapestry and every inch of exposed skin. You pile on blanket after blanket until your mobility is reduced to that of a stuffed goose. Some nights, you wonder if you're sleeping or being preserved for a future royal feast. The only sign of life is the occasional puff of breath, visible in the candlelight, and the muffled complaint of your spouse, who has just realized they are sleeping on the icy side of the mattress. Servants add to the drama, bustling in and out with warming pans full of hot coals and dire warnings about catching a chill. Herbal sachets are stuffed between the blankets, lavender for sleep, rosemary for courage, and mint for the unlikely event that you survive until spring. Even the royal pets burrow deeper, the lapdogs vanishing under covers, while the cat sets up shop directly on top of your knees. You're not so much sleeping as hibernating, emerging only when duty or breakfast calls. Then, just when you've gotten used to sleeping wrapped like a mummy, summer arrives. The stone walls, so eager to torment you with cold, now turn into heat-trapping ovens. Sunlight pours through the high windows, and even the thickest curtains can't keep the warmth at bay. The royal bed transforms from a cozy refuge to a medieval sweat lodge. You lie on top of the covers, arms and legs splayed, dreaming of ice. The fire is out, but the air feels like soup. Servants respond with creative solutions. Tapestries are swapped for lighter cloths, windows are pried open to catch non-existent breezes, and buckets of water are left nearby for the desperate to dab on their faces. The king declares shirtless nights, which no one asked for, and the queen invents a complicated ritual of cooling compresses involving rosewater and whatever herbs the physician hasn't already turned into a potion. Everyone complains, including the court jester, who makes a fortune with jokes about royal sweat stains. Summer is the season of midnight strategy. You sleep with 1 foot out from under the covers, rotate pillows every hour, and seriously contemplate moving to the cellar with the cheese. If you're really unlucky, a storm rolls in, adding humidity and a full orchestra of leaks, drips, and the ever-optimistic croak of frogs. No matter the season, comfort is elusive. By spring, you're exhausted, half-frozen, half-baked, and absolutely convinced the weather is a plot against your dynasty. And yet, every morning you rise, brush the frost from your nightcap or wring out your nightshirt and do it all again. If that's not royal resilience, nothing is. Midnight hunger? Of course. But the royal midnight snack is no pizza delivery. It's a page stumbling in with cold mutton, stale bread, or a suspicious pudding, all served on solid silver that someone will definitely trip over. Leftovers attract mice, but at least you'll never lack for nocturnal company. Medieval castles were not built for the whims of late-night cravings, but hunger does not respect royal schedules. When your stomach grumbles after midnight, you can forget about sneaking to the fridge in your pajamas. Instead, you ring a small silver bell, and a servant appears, bleary-eyed, hair wild, clutching a tray heavy enough to double as a weapon. The menu is whatever survived dinner: hunks of greyish mutton, bread that's mostly crust, a bowl of cheese that's been on a journey, and, if you're lucky, an apple that hasn't begun to ferment. Eating in bed is not for the faint of heart. The royal mattress is already home to feathers, straw, at least 3 dogs, and a possible mouse. Add a plate of food to the mix, and you've created a veritable wildlife buffet. Every bite is an exercise in balance. One hand holds the candle, the other wrestles with the mutton, all while fending off the Queen's lapdog, who believes himself entitled to at least half of whatever you're eating. Presentation is everything. The food arrives on ornate platters, the kind that make modern charcuterie boards look like sad school lunches. Gold-gilded plates and engraved goblets are par for the course. The only problem? In the half-light of midnight, it's easy to mistake last week's garnish for this week's dessert, and the servants are too tired to care. You eat by touch, by smell, and sometimes by faith alone. The pudding jiggles in a manner that should be scientifically impossible. The bread doubles as a weapon against potential intruders, or at least a handy distraction for an ambitious cat. And then, of course, there's the etiquette. It's not exactly elegant to munch on leftovers while reclining in bed, but medieval royalty excel at pretending that whatever they're doing is the height of sophistication. The king requests another slice of cold pheasant, and may it be served with dignity. The page announces, trying not to yawn or drop crumbs into the royal nightshirt. If a guest noble is present, midnight snacks quickly turn into a competitive eating display, complete with debates about the best way to gnaw a mutton bone without waking the bishop. Leftovers, naturally, are a problem. No one in the Middle Ages ever invented Tupperware, so unfinished snacks linger in the shadows, sometimes for days. Servants attempt to tidy up, but it's only a matter of time before a lapdog, a ferret, or an especially bold mouse decides to help themselves. This is how you end up with a midnight surprise of the unwelcome kind. A rustling in the linen, a stolen morsel, or the sudden appearance of a tiny paw in the pudding. It's a courtly version of nature's survival of the fittest. The risks go beyond rodents. Medieval doctors warn that eating after dark encourages nightmares, indigestion, and possibly seeing visions of your ancestors scolding you from the foot of the bed. Nevertheless, the temptation persists. The best stories in court often begin with a midnight feast. Alliances struck over shared cheese, secrets whispered between bites of pie, and the occasional impromptu poetry recital fueled by a particularly strong cup of mead. For all its hazards, the midnight snack ritual has its comforts. There's something undeniably soothing about breaking bread in the quiet hours, sharing crumbs with a faithful dog, and savoring the silence that settles over even the rowdiest castle. Just as you drift off, the tray is whisked away. The crumbs are, mostly, swept up, and the bedchamber returns to its usual mix of chaos and comfort. So, next time hunger strikes after hours, remember, medieval royalty didn't have pizza, but they did have cold mutton, questionable pudding, and more nocturnal drama than any midnight snack run should ever inspire. So, you've survived a night in the medieval royal bedchamber. You've endured the parade of servants, the drafty curtains, and a mattress that's about as supportive as your least favorite relative at Thanksgiving. You braved midnight chamber pot adventures, dodged the royal snoring, and shared your pillow with 3 dogs, a future bishop, and a chamberlain who may or may not have been quietly judging your sleep posture. Not bad for a modern human with strong opinions about thread count. Tonight, we discovered that the royal bedchamber was less a sanctuary of rest and more a circus of politics, animals, and people with questionable hygiene, all squeezed together in one very expensive, very crowded room. You learned that privacy was a rumor, comfort was negotiable, and bedtime was a public event, best observed by a rotating cast of nobles, servants, and livestock. Through the flicker of candlelight and the haze of incense, sometimes just to cover up last week's cheese plate, medieval royalty found a way to rest, sort of, even with the weight of crowns and conspiracies pressing down on every lumpy feather pillow. But if there's one thing to take away, it's that humans, no matter their century, have always been stubborn, resourceful, and just a little bit ridiculous. They survived freezing nights, gossiping courtiers, lice, and the world's most judgmental lapdog. They turned insomnia into statecraft and bedtime into a team-building exercise. Their world was messier, noisier, and way smellier than ours, but they found moments of comfort anyway. A hot stone at the foot of the bed, a whispered prayer, a good story, or the perfect spot next to the fire. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a clean bed, with sheets that don't bite, and a thermostat that doesn't require 3 servants and a handful of peat, maybe send a little gratitude backward through time. Be thankful for modern mattresses, private bathrooms, and the fact that no one is reporting on your snoring to the Privy Council, because history is proof that people will put up with almost anything for a little bit of rest. They endured, they adapted, and somehow they always managed to find a reason to laugh. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and drift off knowing that whatever chaos tomorrow brings, at least you won't wake up next to the court jester. Good night, sleep well, and remember, even in the world's most uncomfortable bed, you're never alone. History is always right there with you, quietly snoring in the background.